Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, OnPay. Without them, we could not be sharing these important stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Jeremy Heilpern with Ammunition. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm excited to learn what you're up to. I know it's been a while since we've chatted, but tell us about Ammunition, how you serving folks, and what's new.
Yeah, so it's been a wild year, I think, since last we spoke. I think when we talked last time, it was just kind of months into the pandemic and everyone kind of navigating that. So things have changed quite a bit. I mean, we fortunately weathered last year pretty well. We actually saw a 2x increase in agency growth over the course of the last year, both in headcount and revenues and that sort of thing. Our business model, we're a full service marketing and advertising agency, and our primary vertical focus is within home and building materials. And as you can imagine, as folks were locked at home for the last year, they spent a lot of money investing in, that screen porch they never got around to, or remodeling their kitchen, or, doing those kind of additions to their house. And so for our clients, they largely saw it as a growth year, and we kind of grew alongside them. We actually were recognized as one of Atlanta's fastest growing independently held companies for 2021 as well, kind of coming out of the tail end of that. So it's been kind of a wild ride. We've been fortunate in that respect, but we've used that as kind of an opportunity to kind of reassess our business and say, it could have been us. We've got good friends who are agencies in travel and hospitality, for example, who didn't weather that storm quite the same way. So, using it as kind of a wake-up call as we think about our business and areas of expansion and other verticals and that sort of thing has kind of become our go forward. But overall, can't complain too much about what's happened over the last little while.
Now, you bring up an important point. During the pandemic, obviously, certain industries were hit harder than other industries, and you happen to be focusing on an industry that weathered the storm pretty well. But just as, I don't want to say random, but it's kind of random in the sense that certain industries didn't weather the storm as well. Is moving forward, does that kind of encourage you to maybe diversify your portfolio and kind of broaden outside of a niche that you're kind of have a really good handle on? Or is it something that you're like, you know what, let's just keep doubling down on this hand because it seems to be working for us?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think for us, we don't want to lose track of what we're good at. And we certainly don't want to undermine our position in that space, because I think we've built a pretty good brand with a lot of credibility within that building materials environment. But at the same time, I think as a leadership team, we've had a lot of discussions to say it could have been us, right? When was the last time you heard of an economic crisis that saw housing pull the economy through? It's unique, right? So for us, we've kind of gone back to the basics to say, what is it that we do? And the way we've articulated it is, we ultimately focus on supporting brands that navigate long-term selling environments with complex paths to purchase. So, not beer and bubble gum. It's the kind of stuff that takes 6 to 24 months. You're dealing with a number of different constituencies in that process. That certainly is the case in building materials. And as we've looked at expanding our portfolio, we said, let's focus on other industries where that DNA exists, right? And let's take that model and apply it there. And we've already started down that path. In fact, we've got some wins we'll announce in the next couple of weeks of brands in other adjacent industries outside of building materials where that playbook is being deployed. And it all comes from exactly kind of to your question, this intent to kind of diversify and fortify ourselves as an agency to where we can withstand a punch in the face and it doesn't, melt the business down, if that makes sense.
Now, if you were giving advice to other maybe smaller emerging not even just agencies, but any business as a whole, when you're kind of doing this kind of self-introspection or kind of auditing your own business, what does that look like? How kind of raw is that, and how vulnerable does the leadership team have to be in order to really kind of question the foundation of the business. Like, you don't want to get rid of your true north, obviously, and your kind of secret sauce, but you also want to be open to other areas that you might have kind of an unconscious bias towards, or you might have dismissed previously because that's the way you were thinking, 10 years ago when you began this, or, so you don't want to kind of be limiting, but you also, you don't want to be too Pollyanna also. So how do you kind of have that it's a tough conversation, I would think, with a lot of folks to really self-evaluate at that level in order to really see if there is opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question. The way we articulate it on our side is, where do we have the right to win, right? So, pitching a piece of business where we just aren't qualified, for example, not being reactive, I think is kind of the core of it. But, when you start pitching other pieces of business where you don't have that quote right to win, you're putting yourself at a disservice because you're kind of devaluing the agency's offering. In our case, that obviously can apply to other businesses outside of the advertising environment. But it's about focusing on where you have that right to win, such that that if you're investing the time, resource, and energy to go pitch that piece of business, you at least have a fair shake at winning it. If you're overextending into spaces where you don't have that right to win, whether that's you don't have the experience, you don't have the team, you don't have the internal capability, whatever that happens to be, but you're stretching for it. I think agencies in particular, in my experience, are notorious for that. Where you get so excited by the opportunity, or it's a brand you've wanted to work on, but if you really have the self-awareness to take a step back and look at your business and ask that question, why do we have the right to win this business? If you can't answer that in a very objective and tangible way, then you're probably making a bad decision. And I don't say that to lecture or anything like that. We did that over the last year. Like when we were kind of neck deep in saying, okay, yeah, this is going well for us, but what if? We were introduced to some, agency search consultants who invited us into pitches, and we got really excited and we participated. And while we showed well, there's a couple of those where we didn't win. And when it really came down to it, there was always a very specific thing that if we were self-aware when we were walking into it, we would have self-identified that as a challenge for us, and we just should have known better. So I would say the self-awareness to be able to identify where you have the right to win, and then using that to then find additional places where you have that right. Much like I articulated earlier, when we looked at our business and said, let's take away the labels of what verticals we're talking about, and let's just talk about what makes those verticals tick. Okay, cool. Now that we've defined that, what are all the verticals where that exists, such that we have the right to win in those spaces, because we're really good at navigating those selling environments.
But when you do identify those verticals, do you just pick one of them, or do you just say that, okay, now any one of these, if an opportunity presents itself, then we'll be ready for it?
In our case, we've taken the position of being choiceful in that. I think there are businesses, as I mentioned, where those verticals operate similarly to building materials. And so we've then looked for opportunities where we can build relationships into those sorts of organizations, get some at-bats and working with them, participating in some national agency searches for those types of business, and packaging ourselves up where we kind of outline, this is what we bring to the table. Certainly, if you look at our cases, you look at our client roster, it's disproportionate in another way. But really focusing on that right to win around the way we approach the work and how it applies to their business has overcome that. It's not even become a talking point in those discussions with prospective clients in adjacent industries.
So now, how have you seen maybe the industry as a whole kind of handle the pandemic? Obviously, there's been some fallout. Are you seeing any trends? Is there more consolidation? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, on a surface level, what we've seen is independent shops like ours have seen it as, those who've been positioned well have seen growth. I think the larger, publicly held network agencies haven't seen the same success. And so I think those independent shops where you're not having to deal with investor overhead and all of that kind of stuff that comes with having shareholders have been able to be aggressive and kind of weather the storm a little bit better. I do think what the pandemic did more concretely is it exposed organizations whose P&L was shaky. And as they approached, a storm like the last year, not to say anybody could expect it or any of us knew what we were doing when we were heading into it. I think those agencies in particular who were sitting on a shaky P&L were exposed. I mean, there are big 150-person shops that we could talk about today who closed 3 doors, 4 doors, having offices around the country seemingly overnight. And if you would have walked into that and said, is that an agency that looks vulnerable? You probably would have said no. So I think what we've seen is agencies consolidate around, kind of core internal teams. I think agencies are being choiceful in terms of where they are spending their money and investing in talent. But I think they're being aggressive at the same time from a new business standpoint. So I know that that's been the case for us, which is to say, not to rest on any laurels or anything, but continue to act like you're hungry and you need it, and approach the business that way while being really prudent in terms of the fiscal management of the organization as well.
Now, what about talent? How has kind of the pandemic affected your pursuit of talent? Has it just opened the world that now your talent is from everywhere, or were you always kind of getting talent from everywhere, or has anything changed in that regard?
Yeah, I think I'm a younger guy who's kind of old at heart on this issue. I think there's so much value in being in the room together. And I think for us, we've looked at the last year to say, what did we learn about remote work that gets the best out of our people that we should keep? And what did we learn about remote work that we need to overcome as we migrate back into an office? So in full disclosure, we've reopened our agency up. We're at limited capacity, and, folks aren't in, every single day. We kind of a rotating 3 days in office at 50% capacity kind of schedule, and let people self-govern based on their own comfort and what they want to do. But it's meant to encourage, number one, culture and us getting in a room and working together. But I think what agencies do is inherently collaborative. And so being able to get in a room and talk about those ideas is really important. So we're still in kind of the everyone kind of do what you think is best for you type of setup, while putting some guardrails around. Let's make sure we're getting some face time. We're getting back in the habit of working together. Because I think for us, one of the things we saw is, we had teams who were working too much during the pandemic. And when we started to initiate the idea of coming back into the office, one of the things I started to hear as well, if I have to commute again, so that's an hour and a half that I could have been working. And, my response back to when I heard this is, if you need that commute time to do your work, you're being overworked. And so getting into some of these best practices around, staying home to then take on more work is also dangerous, right? So we want to make sure we have that cadence and those open lines of communication where we're being fair to our people and our people are being fair to themselves. And we don't accidentally find ourselves taking advantage because, when you're home, you're just kind of on all the time in the setup. So for us, we've not approached this, well, now we can, recruit from the world. I will say it's made it a challenge to recruit, right? Especially for hires we've made fully remote, where they've not even come into the office. They've never even met in person somebody else that they work with. So I think it's changed how we think about recruitment. It's changed the process and kind of the due diligence we do along that way. And it's reemphasized the importance for us around, getting that face time now that, people are getting vaccinated and we have some more flexibility around that, such that we can do some of that relationship building. Because, I think there's this adage in this business in particular, which is if you're in the room, everyone already believes you can do the work. It's a decision of whether they like you or not. And I think that is, I think that's true. Like there's a lot of value in, getting along, being, complementary in terms of skill sets and capabilities and personalities and that kind of thing, such that people feel, that bond with their coworkers and are excited to work together every day.
Yeah, I think that in person allows those kind of accidental collaborations or those serendipitous moments with people that aren't maybe a part of the core team, but are tangential, to learn and to interact and to maybe bubble up an idea that would have been harder if everybody was kind of separate in their own home around the world. That kind of accidents, that serendipity doesn't happen unless you orchestrate it, and it's hard to do.
I think that's true. Like I think about even just creative reviews, we're working on a brand campaign and, our creative director is pinning stuff up on the wall. If you think about that in a remote environment, he's having to package a presentation or at least organize his thoughts more than perhaps kind of a tissue session would be in the office. And then he's inviting deliberate people into that meeting versus if we're having it in a public place in the office and somebody happens to walk by and want to participate, right? They can do that. And so I think that's the challenge with remote. Like certainly there are good things that have come from it, but there's also challenges it's exposed that I think we all would do well to be mindful of, making sure we're kind of getting the best out of both environments.
Yeah, and I think it's especially true in a creative field. I mean, like if everybody's, just kind of hunkered down and doing their own work in their own little silo, maybe that's not as important. But in a creative endeavor where a good idea can come from anywhere, you got to really be mindful of that.
100%.
Now, talk to me about, Ammunition is an independent, but you're also part of the Worldwide Partners kind of network. Can you talk about how that helps you kind of get the best of both worlds?
Yeah, so for those that aren't familiar, Worldwide Partners, and there are a couple other organizations like it, but it's an international network comprised solely of independent agencies. So if you think about, a network holding company, it is a network that holds other agencies, right, as part of that holding organization. And, in most cases, they're publicly traded. And the value in that for clients as they approach it is it gives you vast reach within that network. Any agency around the world or a specialization that another agency has, it's kind of all in the family, right? But that's a different kind of organization, those publicly traded large organizations. For independently held shops like ours, there are these organizations like Worldwide Partners where agencies buy in kind of as shareholders of the network, and we put the network to work for the agencies. So, for example, we've worked with agencies, in California who needed to have a presence in Atlanta. We've worked with agencies in Europe who were breaking into the U.S. market, agencies in Singapore who needed to be briefed on the way to approach building materials and manufacturing in the United States. So what it gives agencies is kind of instant scale into other markets, as well as deep specialization around kind of business issues you may deal with your clients, such that you can either kind of bolt them on as an additional member of the team, or you can use them internally as kind of a resource for additional information. So it allows independent shops to compete like the bigger network organizations, if that makes sense.
And then how is the partners organized? You're all kind of owners of the network, or how does that work?
Essentially, yeah. That and so every agency is still independent, but the network is essentially comprised of all those agencies who then kind of own a piece of the network. The ownership side of that is really kind of not important into the day-to-day operations, but in most cases, when the world is a normal place, we'll have global meetings where we'll meet in different regions around the world and bring agencies together, and it's kind of a good opportunity to, even outside of kind of the normal operation stuff, kind of be exposed to how these same problems are being solved in other parts of the world, trends and from a media standpoint, creative ideas. It's really good just for a collaboration and knowledge sharing component as well.
Now, when you started Ammunition, were you part of this, or this is something that as you kind of grew, you found out about it and then you were like, hey, this is an asset to all of our clients because now we're able to deliver a little bit more value and share a little bit more knowledge?
Yeah, I've been in this industry for a long time, and so I've been in other agencies who have been part of other networks, and so this setup is familiar to me. We did seek out joining once we felt like we were at a size where it made sense. So we started the agency in 2017. I think we became a member of Worldwide Partners beginning of 2020. So it wasn't, part of our founding, so to speak, but it was something we felt like we grew into. And then it was kind of like that next right step in the agency's evolution to kind of bolt on those resources. And selfishly, for the leadership team here, like we saw a lot of value in let's build that camaraderie with other agency partners, people who deal with the same things we do. Let's be able to, kind of have that group of folks that we can kind of lean on and talk to and benefit from, those discussions with as we all navigate the same problems together.
So what do you need more of? How can we help you?
What do we need more of? Clients really is great. We're a very growth driven organization. I think that's kind of the name of the game for us. We're constantly in growth mode and expanding both our team internally and externally. So that's kind of the big thing for us, but I think that's the case for almost any small business, right?
So now, from a talent standpoint, who do you need right now? More creative, more account folks, more finance?
We're growing. We're growing. We're looking for more folks on the account team. We're looking for more folks within our creative team. We're growing within the media team as well. So I would say, on our website, we keep that pretty up to date with the latest and greatest in terms of career opportunities, and we're hiring across all disciplines right now.
And then from kind of a biz dev standpoint, what niches are you targeting right now, or it's the same building materials or some of those kind of shoulder industries?
Yeah, I would say what we're good at, as I mentioned earlier, is brands that navigate those long-term selling environments. So if you are managing a brand whose kind of selling process can take anywhere from 6 to 24 months, You've got both B2B and B2C components of the business with multiple influencers that all need to be addressed as part of that path to purchase. I think we've got a very unique approach to how we navigate those things. And we're certainly always open for a conversation, whether that's just to provide guidance or if there's work that we can do together, we're certainly always willing to help.
And if somebody wants to learn more, what's the website?
Ammunition.agency.
Good stuff. Well, congratulations on all the success.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time today to talk.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.